This is a video about replacing a hard-wired smoke detector. Something happened to the original soundtrack when I was recording this, and I can't use it. So I'm just going to record this more on a narrative basis based on the footage that I made while I was doing this. So I was getting ready to paint the ceiling, and when I do that, I like to remove um, light fixtures, wall switch plate covers, and so forth. And so I was removing the smoke detector and noticed that it was over 10 years old, and they recommend that you replace these once they're 10 years old. I thought they were all supposed to chirp when that happens, but this one didn't. So I was just fortunate that I caught the date. So to remove it, you basically twist, just twist, and it should pull down. And then you'll see there's some wires with the harness and a plug. So you just unplug it from the existing smoke detector. And if you were replacing the smoke detector with the same manufacturer, same brand, um, you could just plug a new one in. But in my case, um, the ones that they sell at Lowe's were different, and in fact, I couldn't even tell which what the manufacturer of this, what brand this was. And I was pointing also to the date. There's a date in the back, which in this case it was 2008. When you replace the smoke detector, you have to also replace the base plate. I did read someplace that if your plug is incompatible with the new unit that you're installing, that you can buy an adapter. If you do that, you'd have to replace the base plate also. And I guess you would do that if you don't want to replace the wires at all. And I don't know how easy it is to find those adapters, but just to let you know, in case the situation ever arises, that I did hear that that's possible. So in this case, then, we've got to remove the base plate and the old wiring harness. So it's two screws that screw the plate to the box. Um, and for some reason in this house, the screws are all sheetrock screws instead of machine screws, but that's just the way they built it. By the way, I want to mention that I am not an electrician, so please keep that in mind throughout this entire video. So make sure that you cut the power to the smoke detectors. Um, it's usually one circuit breaker for all of the smoke detectors. What I do is after I cut the power and remove all the connectors, I use a tester to double check that the power is off, because strange things do happen. In any event, then you need to pull down the wires, so you expose all the wires. Sometimes they're all pushed in there accordion style, and you may be seeing right now a ground wire. This would probably be the only time that you'll run across a situation where you don't need to connect the ground. So this smoke detector has no ground to be connected. The new smoke detector doesn't either, and so the box is plastic, so the ground wire is just hanging in there loose. That's the way they built it. So there's three wires. The white wire is the neutral. The black wire carries the power, and then you have the red wire. The red wire goes from smoke detector to smoke detector so that they can communicate with each other. So that if one smoke detector goes off, they all go off. So in terms of powering the smoke detector, it's the black and white wire. So again, uh, test it uh, just to be sure. I always like to test the power wire with the ground as well. Sometimes that'll tell you something that you don't otherwise know. Sometimes the wires aren't coded properly with the colors, and there could be some surprises. You're ready to connect the new wiring harness. Match up the colors. In this case, the colors are the same: black, white, and orange or red. If you notice, the wiring harness that was removed was black, white, and yellow. So the third wire is always the yellow or orange in this case was the wire that goes from smoke detectors to smoke detectors so they could communicate. So um, you just make the connection. Um, I'm using the same wire nuts that were there. They're a little too big for the job, but I didn't have any other ones, and they did hold the wires on very well. And in replacing them, they did catch very well, and they made a nice firm connection. So I'm reusing them all. So you just go from wire to wire and make the connection. So the house wiring is solid. Those are solid wires, and the wires for the smoke detector in the harness, those are stranded. So what I always do is give those stranded wires a little twist so that the ends are not all frayed. See, a little twist so that they're all together, and then twist them onto um, the house wire, and then most of the time the insulation is removed. A little bit more insulation is removed from the house wire than from the wiring harness. I wouldn't worry too much about that. Just be sure that the ends are even when you go to twist on the connector, and that everything catches and is nice and firm. Once you've made your connection, go ahead and stuff everything back in the box, being careful not to um, damage the integrity of the connection that you just made. So be gentle. And there I made sure that there was some room for the harness, some movement, so that when the smoke detector is flush with the wall, the harness has room to go into the box. So that's a shot of the old smoke detector. And one of the things that I like about the new one versus the old one is that on the old one, in order to replace the battery, I had to um, remove it from the ceiling. And you know, when that happens, you can do a lot of things can happen. You can loosen up the connection if you're pulling too hard. Uh, where your wing nuts are, or the connection itself can be loosened. Um, so it's not a good thing. Now the new one has the battery on the outside. So there are 3 pins on the smoke detector. Two are close together. One is a little bit further out. So you just have to make sure that you match up the pins and then insert the jack, into the outlet that's on the smoke detector. So there's the new smoke detector. You'll see that there's a plastic a thing over there that I just pulled out, and I realized that, and there's the battery. You see, so you access it without you can access it without having to remove it from the ceiling. That is just so wonderful. And you don't have to plug in the little terminals either. It just slips right in. I believe this is a first alert smoke detector. That's just a really great feature. So you put in your new base, just follow the holes. There's plenty of holes there depending on what your situation is. And just put it up and tighten the screws up. And I always use a clockwise motion to be sure that the screws are up against the opening, and tighten them up, but not too much because you can crack the plastic. But as long as it's nice and firm, remembering that you're going to have to, perhaps in the future, either twist it on or twist it off for whatever reason, and you want it to stay firm, and make sure that there's some give again, and also make sure you haven't crimped any wires in the process, that you haven't caught any wires in between the bracket and the wall. And then match up the holes. It's two little pins, two little holes on one side, and then another one a little further apart. And so you could see I was having a little bit of trouble lining it up just right, and getting it to snap in. But once I got it snapped in, then the rest is easy. Um, One thing that I realized for the others that I put in later is to wait to remove that plastic strip. The plastic strip covers the terminals of the battery, and so I would like to test it um, without a battery, which is the equivalent if you leave the plastic strip in, and with the battery. So turn the circuit breaker back on, um, and press the button, and make sure that the smoke detector works, and make sure that the others are going off when you press the test button as well, because that's the whole idea. If you're in a room in a different part of the house and the smoke detector goes off in a basement, for example, and you're on the top floor with the doors closed, you want to be able to hear that there's something going on. So that's why they all go off. But in any event, test it with and without the battery, however you do it. I just think it's a good practice. By the way, I was able to buy, there are 6 smoke detectors in my house, one in each bedroom and the hallways, etc. So by coincidence, Lowe's had a packet of 6 for, I think it was around $55. Excellent price, just great. I hope that you enjoyed the video. I know I watch a lot of YouTube videos, and I thought it was time for me to just contribute a little bit, and hopefully somebody found something I said useful. So goodbye, and have a nice day.